Hello and welcome to yet another interesting and enlightening edition of Off the Press. Today, Wednesday, the 19th of June, 2019. We've got quite a number of newspapers today. We've got Vanguard newspaper, the Nation newspaper, the Punch newspaper, This Day newspaper, and if we've got time, we'll also take Complete Sports. You know how we do things right here. We always analyze the major headlines and the major stories, and joining us here in the studio to make sure that we've got perfect analysis on all of the major stories is public affairs analyst Gbolahan Olojede. Good to see you this morning.
Good to be here.
Thank you very much for joining us. So, anything new with you from the last time we met?
Oh, well, a lot of things.
A lot of things
have happened.
Okay.
It's a daily thing. Mm-hmm. Things keep happening. Even between yesterday and today, a whole lot of things have happened.
All right. Okay, let's delve straight into the newspaper headlines. Let's start with the Vanguard. We'll start from the very top. Let's see if we can bring that on the screen. Vanguard newspaper. Vanguard newspaper. Let's see if that's coming up. Okay, there it is right there. The major headline we can see in the center of your screen right now. Our fears for future polls in Nigeria. That's according to US bodies. And underneath that, we've got presidency insists Buhari won 2019 polls, faults NDI, RI reports, defends suspension of ex-CJN Onogen. We're not children, we can take care of ourselves, APC says. NDI, IRI reports show presidential election was rigged. That's according to PDP. All of those stories are fully detailed on page 9. Okay, let's look at the top now. We've got on the top left-hand corner, Tiwa Savage to debtor firms, pay me or I'll expose you. That story is on page 11. That's the Entertainment Daily column. In sports, they've got Okagbare wins 100-meter race at Rabat Diamond League. That story is on page 54. And in the top right-hand corner, we have on page 47, I didn't promise decongestion of Oshodi Apapa Expressway in 60 days, says Sanwo-Olu. Okay, let's look at the bottom of the Vanguard newspaper. We've got a picture there of President Muhammadu Buhari, the secretary to the government, and a whole host of other governors after their meeting at the presidential villa in Abuja yesterday. And at the bottom of the Vanguard newspaper, we've got some interesting stories there. On the bottom left-hand corner, we've got terror attacks. UK government warns Britons against traveling to 24 states in Nigeria. That story is on page 10. And next to that, we've got Kano Emirate crisis, discussions ongoing for resolution, and that's Ganduje speaking, says no gorilla in Kano. That story is on page 8. Next to that, we've got ministerial list. Buhari doesn't need to consult us, APC governors. That story is on page 8. And next to that, we've got the last story there. Nigeria has greater causes of violence than Boko Haram. And that's said by the United Nations. Okay, let's start with the US bodies who say our fears for future polls in Nigeria. That's the main headline. Let's start with your reaction and your initial take.
Well, this coming after the EU report. We already have the EU report. And this is also by some observer nations or teams that were here on ground. These are very important issues for us to strengthen our democracy. Look at the EU, for example. Is a number of nations that have been democratic for donkey years. So they know what it takes, they know what the wrong signs are, and what are the right direction to go. So they can, and they were here on ground. I think they had about 73 observers that were here. And they gave us some very important points. Ditto this new guys. When you read through some of what they were saying, there were things that were observable by you and I. So they were not conjuring stuff, you know. And I just hope that both at the National Assembly level, at the INEC level, political parties, that we will take lessons from what they are saying. For me, the most important part that needs to happen now is that the 9th Assembly has been inaugurated. Once they resume, within 6 months, can we have an electoral law in place? We don't want to wait till the eve of the next elections. And then it becomes an issue, oh, I won't sign this, I won't do this, I won't do that. We don't want that. Because by the time the Electoral Act is signed, there are still issues we need to deal with. There are still testings that we need to do. 2 issues were raised by the INEC chairman, for example, regarding electronic collation. He spoke about blind spots in Nigeria. These are places where you cannot transmit anything. It means we need to deal with those issues. He also spoke about security issues. When you're dealing with electronic devices and electronic medium, you have to be conscious of hacking and all those kind of things. For example, it was said that the reports from the server were made available one way or the other.
Yes.
And some of the comments I've read in the social media was that, oh, hope the people who were able to get that report can also not alter the report. Those are issues that concern cybersecurity. Okay. So we must deal with it, which is why we need to get the law in place as soon as possible. Okay, well, there's just a couple of things. This is really contradictory because the presidency is still insisting that he won the 2019 elections, but NDI and IRI report to show presidential election was rigged. Who do you believe? It's difficult to make commentary along that line right now. The issue of whether he won that election or not is in the court of competent jurisdiction. So we have to be careful what comments we pass. But what has been obvious is that the way the case has gone thus far, there have been a lot of revelation. You and I wouldn't have known about any server if that case had not gone to court, for example. Yeah. And by the time the court is done examining the facts and the evidences and all that, there will be more revelations that you and I will get to know. So maybe he won, maybe he did not win. We should let the court do it. Okay, yeah. All right.
There's quite a number of stories on the Vanguard that I still want us to touch on before we move on to our next newspaper. This is quite an interesting story. Terror attacks. UK government warns Britons against traveling to 24 states in Nigeria. That's
it's worrisome.
Very worrisome.
But then, when you look at the facts, the emerging fact, you take a Zamfara, for example. As a matter of fact, Zamfara is one of the states, and all the states that share borders with Zamfara are also listed. Kaduna, Katsina, Sokoto, Niger, Kebbi. All these states are already having, in fact, places like Katsina is a hotbed of activities, of banditry activities. Ditto all those other places. I think the only place that has not been affected thus far is only Kebbi, for whatever reasons. And what it means is also that Kebbi now has to be on its toes. You know, the one that is also of concern in this particular report is that they had listed all the states in the Niger Delta: Bayelsa, Akwa Ibom, Rivers, and which other one is there? The Delta. All of them have been listed as places that they don't want their citizens to go. It must have been based on certain intelligence report. Yeah. The Nigerian security architecture must lay hold on whatever that report is and use it to prepare.
Okay. All right, thank you very much, Gbolahan. I still want to touch on one more story before we move on to our next newspaper, but because of time, you know, if you can summarize in 60 seconds, thank you. Nigeria has greater causes of violence than Boko Haram, United Nations say.
It does. We've been focused on Boko Haram for so long that we forgot that what is going on in the Zamfara axis is much bigger than Boko Haram. It's much bigger. You know, and it's spreading all across the nation. Even the southwest people are complaining.
Yeah, but do you think it's just what's going on in Zamfara that they're referring to, or do you think there are other items and other
that report is actually talking about land. Okay. How the land issues is beginning to affect and being a major cause of insecurity. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And that is not just about the Northeast. It's all over Nigeria, even in the Southwest.
All right, thank you very much. Let's move on to our next newspaper now. We've got the Nation newspaper next, and there are quite a number of stories on the Nation newspaper as usual. I'll start at the top. We've got that on your screen right there. We'll start at the top left-hand corner. We've got polls, NRI, NDI report, knocks INEC parties, page 2. Abdul Razak suspends 16 local government chiefs. That's underneath that first story, and that's on page 41. If we look at the the top right-hand corner, we've got ex-minister's son kidnapped on page 43, or your sacked council chief's case for July 30 on page 40. Federal government exceeds oil budget target on page 11. It will be Eagles won't rely on star players. That's sports, and it's on page 47. Okay, before we go down, let's quickly look. There's still a number of stories. If we look at the top of the main headline, we have on the left-hand side, Buhari Sanwo-Olu meet on Lekki, Badagry Port and others. And NCAAs to the right, threat to pull down 8,805 mast sparks dispute. That story starts on that page and continues on page 6. The main headline is at the bottom of your screen right now. Security chiefs may go as governors seek new ideas. That story is on page 6. There's still a number of sub-headlines on that story. NEC meets tomorrow. Burate indicts troops. FCO updates travel advice. If we look at the bottom of the Nation newspaper, there are pictures, and the story at the bottom, on the bottom left-hand corner, is 50 illegal refineries destroyed in Delta. That story is on page 5. Let's quickly start with this main headline. Security chiefs may go as governors seek new ideas. Bearing in mind our time so that we can touch on one or two before we move on to the next story as well. Once again, your reaction to this?
I think they need to go, not may go. What has happened over the last 4 years is you had people who are appointed into positions, and once you get that job, you just keep it forever. That seems to have been the current president's approach. It's not a family chieftaincy title. It should be based on you have to show competence and performance. We did not see that. No minister was removed, no minister was changed. The same thing with the security chiefs. Despite the sliding insecurity issues, I think we need to change. We need brighter ideas than these guys. And the issue of pinning things down on the troop is a great disappointment. Leadership is all about influence. If the leader is saying, I'm unable to influence my subordinates to deliver the goods, there is a major, major problem. I think it's a pointer to the fact that that kind of a leader needs to quit.
Wow. Okay. Let's quickly talk about, speaking on leaders, Buhari Sanwo-Olu meet on Lekki, Badagry Port and others.
That's very important. The Lagos port is congested. There is no hope that this country can maximize the opportunities at its port if it concentrates only on Tinkan and Apapa port. We need to open up other places. The Lekki port and the Badagry present some huge opportunity. And I think there must be a way that Lagos State and the federal government and MPA can work together to take advantage.
Yeah. All right. One more story before we round up on the Nation newspaper. 50 illegal refineries destroyed in Delta.
For me, I think what we need to be able to do is to get this informal, roguish approach to refinery to work for us. Is there a way we can formalize it? Is there a way we can structure it so that these people can produce formally? We can collect taxes from them.
That's a wonderful idea. I was going to say, that's what they should have done in the first place rather than actually destroy them, because these are people that, in as much as it's illegal, it's also still helping the economy and providing a lot of jobs and so many other things.
The fact that it's criminality means it shouldn't be tolerated in the real sense. But we now have to find a way to take it away from that criminality position into a formal structure.
Absolutely. If they can do that, I think, we're in for a good one there. All right, let's move on to our next newspaper. We've got the Punch newspaper next. And with the Punch newspaper as well, there's quite a number of stories. Rather than give you the main headline, let me quickly start at the very top and work my way down. So we've got in the blue background at the very top there, we've got NCAA begins demolition of 8,805 masts over air safety. We saw that story recur on some of the other newspapers earlier. That story is detailed in the Punch on page 34. Underneath that, we've got on the left-hand side, 2019 elections failed to meet 2015 standard. That's the NDI and IRI again. And that for Punch, that story is on page 8. Next to that, we have Sanwo-Olu makes a U-turn on clearing Apapa Gridlock in 60 days. That story is on page 6. I think we should definitely talk about that. But let me quickly take us through the other headlines before we come back to that Sanwo-Olu story. The major headline, as we can see at the bottom of the screen there, soldiers' inadequate commitment affecting insurgency war. That's Buratai speaking. That story is on page 2. The sub-headline is Boko Haram attacks 4 military bases in 1 week. Okay, let's look at the bottom of the Punch newspaper now. The bottom of the Punch newspaper, let's see if we can bring that up. There it is. There we are. We've got pictures of 2 police officers accused of killing an officer of the Nigeria Security and Civil Defense Corps being arraigned at the High Court of the Federal Capital Territory, Nyanya, in Abuja. And that was on Tuesday. So pictures of that there. At the very bottom of the newspaper, we have no role in ministerial list on the left-hand side, says APC governors. That's on page 46. And next to that, we have in the middle, panic as NNPC gas pipeline explodes on Lagos-Ibadan expressway. On the bottom right-hand corner, we have why we can't disclose assets declared by presidents and governors. That's the CCB. That story is on page 10. Okay, you know I was saying that we should talk about Sanwo-Olu, but let's quickly talk about the headline first. Soldiers' inadequate commitment affecting insurgency war, Buratai says.
What they didn't say is why. Why do they lack the commitment? Why don't they want to fight? You as the boss, what have you done towards that? Like I said, leadership is all about influence. So if the leader cannot influence the troop to want to fight, cannot inspire them to do so, maybe it is high time to move on.
Okay, all right. Okay, let's leave that there now and move on to Sanwo-Olu, who is making a U-turn on clearing the Apapa Gridlock in 60 days. This story, actually, someone was telling me about it, is that he made the that he gave the impression that he was going to do something within 60 days, and that all of a sudden he changed his story. Now it's hard to ascertain, was he really telling the truth? Is this politics that has begun in his?
The earlier he backpedaled on this, the better for him, and I think he has done the right thing. There's a possibility he said it. If he didn't say it, why did he have to wait for 2 or 3 weeks before saying, I didn't say that? This news made the headlines almost about 2 or 3 weeks ago.
And he didn't respond at the time.
And he didn't respond at that time. 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you're now saying you didn't say it. And that is because reality must have set in. You cannot make commitment on time frame on something you do not control. It doesn't control this thing. It's the federal government that has the largest share of what has to be done to structure the port the right way to make it work. And he can't influence that. Okay. He can only engage the stakeholders.
I like for us to, to be fair in our analysis. So let's just say, give him the benefit of the doubt that, maybe my colleagues in the industry, maybe shifted it around. Do you think that there's a slight possibility that might have actually been the case where he actually meant one thing and it was construed as another?
It's possible. It happens all the time. But the issue is his own media people should have spotted it and corrected it. You don't have to wait
3 weeks later.
That is the issue.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Let's quickly move on to our next newspaper now. We have This Day newspaper next, and a number of stories as well. Not that many as the other newspapers, but we'll take a look at some of them and then discuss 1 or 2. We'll start at the top once again. Let's see. Yeah, we've got that on your screen already. Again, foreign observers knock 2019 general election. IRI, NDI says it didn't meet previous standards. INEC, we will study the reports. That has been definitely one story that has recurred all around the newspapers that we've got today. That story starts on the front page and continues on page 8 of This Day newspaper. Underneath that, we've got NERC also at the top of the newspaper. 5 million metering gap. Sorry, is that million or meter? 5 million metering gap to close in 3 years. That story is on page 9. Okay, the main headline is at the bottom of your screen right there. Officers, men at the front lines not sufficiently committed, says Buratai. Also, if we look at the bottom, can we bring up the bottom of This Day newspaper? Yes, we've got on the left-hand side, APC governors back off, say ministerial appointments, Buhari's prerogative. Okay, at the very bottom on the left-hand side, we have NCAA to demolish unauthorized masts as ultimatum expires. That story is on page 8. Okay. All right. Okay. Let's start with the main headline as usual. Officers, men at the front lines, not sufficiently committed. We talked about that in the Punch newspaper. So I don't know if you have one final thought to add or not really.
There's nothing to add to it. If they are not committed, why are they not committed? Now, we have seen it. These guys have protested at various times. Then they are probably battle weary. You know how long they've been in the Northeast fighting? And there were other fights that they have had to go into. So they are probably frustrated on several fronts. So as a leader, if you have stopped to be able to influence the people you lead, march on. That's the noble thing to do.
And what a wonderful way for us to end the analysis right there. Because of time, that's where we're going to end it. I wanted us to talk more on one or two more headlines, but time won't permit us. Okay. We've also got complete sports as well, which, as I said, time won't permit us to actually look into the headlines. So thank you very much for your analysis, Gbolahan. It's always good to see you and always good to hear your analysis on the major headlines. Thank you once again. All right, that's where we wrap up on this edition of Off the Press. But if you enjoyed the program, tune in tomorrow, same time, 8:30, when we'll be bringing you the latest headlines and on all of the national dailies. Until then, I remain Tokunbo Taiwo saying good morning.